Me too, a little bit. So that's, oh, so we're live.
Yeah, looks like it.
Nice. Hi.
Okay, hello. We'll just give it a few seconds, so we'll do it a countdown, and then we'll have a quick chat. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and it's Osman here, and I'm Mustafa. We were just planning on doing this impromptu live stream just to talk about a report that we'd all seen with regards to the state of the deep tech investment climate here in Singapore. So there was a report that recently came out, and it was literally covering some of the things around how Singapore as a company, as a country, has really moved in terms of overall global ranking. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And the report that we're going to be referring to in brief is the Global Startup Ecosystem Report from 2024. It was pretty much published, and it shows a number of key things, and looks at a number of key things around the startup ecosystem in Singapore. But if you look at some of the things that are there already, you can see that Singapore ranks number 7 in the world. And obviously the normal players are Silicon Valley, London, New York, Los Angeles, as being the places where you're going to expect the natural state of the ecosystem for startups to be. So yeah, I've got Mustafa here as well, and Mustafa, your background is quite interesting. I don't know whether you want to give everybody a quick introduction.
So I have to admit, this is my first time doing a LinkedIn Live or any kind of live video on LinkedIn. So interesting, fun, and a little nerve-wracking at the same time. So I've been in the startup and innovation ecosystem for about 12 years now, and 8 of those years were with the SME Center, which is an arm of Enterprise Singapore. And over there, I did a ton of advisory work with startups and SMEs, aspiring entrepreneurs, and a lot of inbound startups into Singapore. And one thing I often heard from those businesses, those founders, was that yeah, we really want to set up in Singapore because it looks great for us as a startup, and we might operate in India, Bangladesh, Indonesia, wherever it might be. But they're like, we want to be a Singapore headquartered startup because it's easier to get like funding, it's easier to get credibility, and I find that really fascinating, right? And I feel like Singapore has done that so much better than any other country in the world, even better than Dubai, Hong Kong, and other places. So yeah, I guess that's a strong flavor in the conversation that we're having today, right? About the report, about how Singapore has made this really unique position in deep tech and in the funding and startup ecosystem in general. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and Singapore, you'll get people from the US actually comment that, well, Singapore's unique, Singapore's special, um, but it's at a unique crossroads within the region as well. I mean, you've got Malaysia and Indonesia and India and Bangladesh and Pakistan, very close proximity to Singapore,
Mhm.
and it's one of those places that you consider to be like the Switzerland of the of Asia Pacific, in that if you're looking for somewhere which is a bastion of trust, and in terms of rule of law, then this is the place to do it. And that's why you see, and we've seen over the past few years, large amounts of inward flow from venture capital and family offices based out here. And it is really around the fact that there is an innovative hub that's been developed. And it kind of goes on to like really understanding that report and what were they looking at in terms of what do they mean by ecosystem. And the ecosystem, in our view, is really around the talent,
Mhm.
the education, education ecosystem that we've got here as well, and the government support, which is where your background is, Mustafa. It's like in the government entities that you're working with, and
Yeah,
and yeah, if we were to look at the universities, I mean, NUS, NTU, they're ranked in the top top five, maybe top 10 of the global university ranking, both in terms of
yeah,
research.
absolutely. And it's like there's so much. Singapore has actually pivoted so many times, right? Like over the years as a country in terms of like what they wanted to concentrate on. There's this really interesting. I think it's a report from some university called Singapore Inc. So earlier you accidentally mentioned Singapore as a company, right? And actually that's right. So Singapore Inc. talks about how Singapore has changed so much over the decades, and how like in the early days there was a lot of manufacturing, and then how they moved into like a service economy over the years, and each time they had to change their infrastructure, they had to change like how they educated people and what they trained them on, and I think that's how we've ended up here today as this place where there's been a lot of testing and a lot of trial and error over the years, and come to this sweet spot now.
Yeah. I mean, and I have to admit, I'm a co-founder myself with Curium,
Mhm.
and it's a deep tech startup, like probably one of the hardest types of startups that you can look at. And we were looking at the research and development needed to be done, and having that ready talent to be able to tap into, both in terms of just university expertise, as well as the constant flow of new fresh talent coming out of universities. I mean, I'm not kidding. When I see some of the people that are applying for the jobs in our company, they're just on another level in terms of
Yeah,
skills, ability, experience. It's pretty impressive, and and you don't usually get that here. And I suppose you don't normally get that in many other places where you've got ready talent, like the universities, for example, in America. The reason why you've got Silicon Valley, and the reason why you've got a hub in New York and in Boston is because you've got MIT, and
yeah.
you've got Berkeley, and you've got those types of universities that just churn out the top tier talent. And
Mhm.
obviously, we always talk about people dropping out of university, but these people are already going to places like Stanford anyway, right? Um,
Yeah.
Whether they were going to go to university or drop out, they were already in the top tier anyway. Um, and this is what you've got here. You've got
So as
uh,
the
yeah.
so as the co-founder of a tech startup, would you say that is there a scarcity of tech talent in Singapore, or how would you place it if you were to look inward versus looking outward at perhaps like remote hiring people in other countries? What's that typically felt like?
I mean, and this is a good thing. I mean, Singapore's a small place. Even the tech talent that you're bringing through the universities, a lot of it is coming from outside. So you get people
Mm,
tech talent from Europe. You're getting tech talent from born and bred here in Singapore, from Malaysia,
mhm.
from Indonesia, from China.
Yeah,
So that it's a big mix, and the Singapore government's taken a very pragmatic approach to it. If we need a particular talent, or if we need a particular skill, capability, expertise, um, they're open to different methods and routes for you to get entry into Singapore and become part of that ecosystem. But the intent has always been that we incubate the talent here in Singapore, so that there
yeah,
is a critical mass of talent here, be it born and bred here, or coming from outside. I think
yeah.
I mean, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I see a lot of like talent coming out of the universities here, NTU, NUS, SUTD, and a couple of others, right? And there's a ton of incubators and accelerator programs in these universities. Lately, a lot of focus on robotics and artificial intelligence. Yeah,
Mhm.
I think like 2 years ago, I don't recall seeing any programs on artificial intelligence. Maybe I didn't look deep enough, but now I see a lot of them. So I feel like that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, even within our own company at Curium, I mean, we ended up bringing in talent that really had expertise in artificial intelligence. We didn't jump on the bandwagon of calling ourselves something.ai, but we're
Yeah,
using the large language models and the GPT capabilities to be able to like do really smart stuff with querying terabytes and petabytes of data and making meaningful use of it, um, which has always been a problem when you're looking at people still approaching the same problem in the same way. Give me a dashboard, give me a view. And we're saying, well, if you've got that data, you can use large language models to query it and do it really quick and ask it in
yeah,
natural language. And we're deploying that in our own technology stack now, and yeah, yeah, we're one of these where we're constantly aware of how everybody's jumping on the AI bandwagon, so we don't make a big song and dance about it either. But yeah, I mean, and when we look at the government support, what we've seen, I mean, there's the typical things like grants, and there's the programs to help people come into the country through things like the Entre Pass or easier
yeah.
access to employment pass and things like that. Um, but they've helped build out an ecosystem of venture capital and family offices, making it a great place to be located. That's helped
Absolutely. And
out.
I feel like at every tier, right, there's some sort of assistance there. I spent a lot of time working with the SME ecosystem, so there's so many grants and tax incentives to help businesses, and startups are SMEs too, right? So many of them qualify for these programs too. There was all these like incentives and reimbursements, right, for deploying technology, for sending your staff for training, for R&D, and there's a lot of assistance that goes out there, and I feel like all of this plays into that sweet spot ecosystem.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, and I think that's a key point in terms of having that sweet spot, being able to say, yeah, we've got the talent, we've got the private funding, but how do we make things easier? And so yeah, we're still getting calls from different government agencies saying, is this a particular problem for you? Tell us what you've got. I mean, and here I am. I still consider myself to be, even though I'm a permanent resident, I still consider myself to be a little bit of an outsider. But to be able to have like sessions with the deputy prime minister and the senior minister of Singapore,
yeah,
hear exactly what the problems are, and
yeah,
and you can see the civil servants follow up really quickly as well, and they're making sure that you said this. Can we follow up on that particular point? And it's really quite,
amazing.
yeah. You wouldn't get that if you were in like the likes of America or in the UK. But I think that's just the nature of how relatively small Singapore is as well. You are like very easily 6 degrees of separation from everyone here.
Yeah, and that's what I love about being here is that everyone is accessible. It's just like, okay, um, it's just a matter of perhaps how relevant your inquiry is, or sometimes you might need a warm introduction, but yeah, the fact that you were in a roundtable meeting with the deputy prime minister at that time, I thought that was really really cool. Was that Mr. Heng's sweet kid, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
it's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, no, and you know what? My biggest panic moment was when when you get told, yeah, the minister's going to be at this meeting, can you turn up and share your thoughts? And you think, great. Normally in those situations, you're the guy sat right at the back while everyone
Yeah,
else is looking for a front seat. And when they put me on the table, he was literally sat directly opposite me on the conference table, and I had that oh my god moment, like I'm in the wrong room, I should get out.
like where should I look? Like, like, am I supposed to make eye contact?
Yeah, exactly. It's like I can't believe I'm this close to the senior ministers within the Singapore government. So yeah, it was pretty amazing. I mean, and I think the only thing that is a longer burn for the Singapore government when it comes to deep tech is just mindset of like the population here in Singapore, because like I hate saying it, but there is this concept of your iron rice bowl that if you work in
Yeah,
government, you're kind of set for life, right? Um,
yeah.
but I mean, I reflect on your personal like journey here, right? Because you went into government, you were working there, but you did like the path less trodden specifically here, right? Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Uh, yeah. So after 8 years with the SME Center, then worked with ING Bank as a venture builder in the innovation lab. Did that for about a year, and then worked with KPMG on a short stint. Built an accelerator program with them. It's definitely a very different environment once you jump out from the public sector and into the private sector. There was a lot to learn. I feel like it was a completely different environment, completely different style of working. Um, I'm definitely better for it for the whole experience. Having sat at both seats of the table, um, it's very hard. If I were to I'm trying to think about like some key points I can mention in that, but it's just it's just allowed me to become a lot more adaptable and a lot more, um, yeah, a lot more, able to understand different organizations in a better way,
Yeah.
understand what their needs are, and understand how to work with them better. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I can put my own comment, because sitting from the outside in, like working in a startup and having come from a big corporate as well, um,
Mhm.
I can only imagine the challenge that you had, because when I remember when you went to ING as in that role, my immediate thought was, how are you going to do this? Because these types of companies don't like innovation. It's their very nature not to be innovative. Don't break it. Don't ruin it. We have so much regulation, we cannot do it, is the usual
Yeah.
answer. Um,
Yeah.
Same for when I was working at Verizon. Pretty much
Yeah.
everything was like, we can't do that. We're a regulated entity. We can't do that. The answer was no.
Yeah.
And you had to go and ask for forgiveness rather than for permission, which is not.
Definitely, the bigger the brand is, the more conscious they are of their brand equity getting any kind of danger towards it.
Yeah,
And I think, so I guess the bigger the company is, the smaller risk appetite they'll have. Um, yeah, so that's just something to be really mindful, and having to work within the lines. And of course, as somebody who likes to experiment, it can be frustrating, of course. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I mean, even working in the Big Four, and they have these programs, but they're structured in such a way that they minimize risk at every level. But the whole idea of innovation is that you have to take risk. You have
You have to
to
take risks.
push the boundaries of what you know. So yeah,
Yeah.
I often really didn't envy you actually when you said the roles that you're doing, because it's like, how do you do that? How do you be an innovative leader within a non-innovative company? And I don't mean that in a bad way to those companies. It's just the nature of how they're built and how they operate, and
Mhm.
it's there to actually protect us, the consumer, as well. And some of these companies are there as part of a critical national infrastructure of a country. Um, so yeah, if the banking system fails, it pretty much all fails. So those are the kind of things that they're trying to safeguard and protect. I get that. Um,
Yeah. So there's a couple of key industries, I would say, right, that are super, important and sensitive, right, especially for countries. Banking, telecoms. You've been in the telecom space, right? So coming from Telstra, how sensitive and protected a space it is, right? So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I mean, if I was to go back to this report and look at some of the things, the bits that really just jumped out at me were the for me, like the subsector strengths as well, like life sciences, AI, big data and analytics, and clean tech. Um, I really wasn't expecting that to be our subsector strengths. I don't really know what I was expecting, but but the more and more deep tech startups I come across now, they do fit into that mold of, you know, um, AI, big data analytics, clean tech, battery recycling technologies and recycling technologies. Well, it's probably because the nature of the industries around here as well. They're dealing with real problems that need to
Yeah.
be solved. Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. I feel like there's a lot of scope, for all of these here, and like we, I think we just don't really notice sometimes, right? Because these seem like very heavy tech subjects. We're probably exposed to it all the time, but we just don't even realize. I'm trying to think off the top of my head about where AI, big data, clean tech, and stuff like that is adopted. Just when I look out the window, I can't find specific examples, but I'm pretty sure it's there. And I know the government's taking these things and putting them out there, and it's just improving our way of life, and we don't even know.
yeah. I mean, and some of these interesting approaches, when you're talking about the ESG types of companies, they're addressing problems that are based in Thailand and in Indonesia. If you just look at anecdotally, like the Alliance to End Plastic Waste is based here in Singapore. Um,
Hmm.
but their main projects are all based around Indonesia, trying to reclaim plastic from the oceans and stuff like that, because it's a real problem. It's a real
Yeah.
issue. Um, Whereas it's not so much of an issue in, in like France. Well, apart from the River Seine being like really uh, unhealthy. But let's not go that way. But it, the issues here are very acute. They're very obvious, and so it kind of drives the purpose for many of these founders as well when we
Yeah,
look at
that's
them.
right. Yeah, and kind of brings us back to the earlier point about these founders setting up in Singapore, to get that structure there so that they can solve problems, in their own countries, right? Where there's a lot of problems to solve, and I'm guessing on that side of it, there's a lot of money to make then to solve those problems.
Yeah. I mean, we've been live streaming for about 20 minutes now, so we obviously don't want to drag this out for too long. But let's
Mhm.
have a quick look at the rankings in terms of like this type of effort that's gone in to get Singapore up to number 7 on the global rankings. Um, and you can start to see, I mean, if we were to look at Singapore specifically, I mean, a few years ago it was ranked like 18. um, so
Yeah,
it's on its way up to the top, and obviously there's still a long way to go to get into the top three, top four. But you're competing now with the likes of Boston and Los Angeles and Tel Aviv and London. So we're definitely there, and we're doing. I would say Singapore's doing the right things. Um, I mean,
I
are
wonder
there any?
what.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, I wonder what drastically changed in the last 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it?
Mm.
And when I was looking at the report, and if I just bring this one up, I mean, you can start to see that there were a big push in terms of funding rounds and exits as well, which kind of drive that ranking up. In the last few years, what did we have? We had Grab and the like. They domiciled here, so they're not necessarily homegrown companies, but they're domiciled here and then they're listed on the Nasdaq.
Still
Or
counts.
yeah, and but like yeah, reverse banks, things like that, right? And So all of that kind of adds into the nature of like pushing the rankings up, and there has been actual questions being asked like, where do you think you're going to be in the next 12 to 18 months? What are the
Yeah,
exit opportunities and exit criteria? Now, most founders don't want to talk about exits because it's very premature, but you've got to have that in mind. And historically in Singapore, those exits have been going through listing on the stock markets in the US,
yeah,
which
that's right. And to your earlier point, also, right, where about the homegrown companies, right? And I hear this a lot too from other people, right? That like, where do you draw the line, right, between a re-domiciled company into Singapore versus a homegrown company, right? Like a Grab, which started, I think it started in Malaysia, if I'm not wrong,
yeah,
and then re-domiciled in Singapore. I hope I'm getting that right. Just in case I've got that wrong, I'm sorry. But um, and then let's say let's say something like an Old Chang Kee, right, which is literally homegrown and from the ground up. Um, yeah. So where do you draw the line? Would you consider them both local companies, like homegrown companies? Would you consider them what kind of box do they go in? As yeah,
Yeah.
questions that keep me up
And
at night.
yeah, I know. And strictly speaking, when you're looking at reports like this, that they're Singaporean companies now, but they started off addressing a problem in their own country. Like in Singapore, we never had a problem with taxis. Well,
Yeah,
not really. We didn't need, we didn't feel that there was a need for ride hailing and ride hailing apps. Um, but in Malaysia and in Indonesia and places like that, where you know, uh, trying to get hold of a cab and get them to be trustworthy and give you a reliable fare, real
yeah,
problem. And so those problems manifest themselves in those countries, and then where do you build your business? And often to build your business and get it ready for future investment, it often means bringing it to some place like Singapore or
yeah,
redomiciling into America.
yeah,
And let's not underestimate that. I mean, I've been talking to some of our startups in Accelerating Asia, and they're looking at redomiciling to the US because access to capital is a lot higher there. And if you're domiciled in the US, suddenly you're seen as a super high tech company, and your valuation goes up by a large number of multiples. Whereas if you're in Southeast Asia, those multiples can be muted just because you're domiciled here.
that's
So
really interesting. Yeah, and that's something I'm starting to see now, which is funny because in the last 10 years it was companies redomiciling in, and for the first time I'm seeing companies redomicile out. Really, really interesting. I would love to like research and learn more about that.
yeah, I mean, and I think this is the reason why Singapore's still at number seven and not at number one and number two. That's why Silicon Valley and New York are in the top two. Because of that, you have real reasons to be domiciled there, and
Yeah.
have access to that type of capital and skill set. Yeah,
Mm, nice, nice.
yeah. Anyway, I mean, this was like literally our first go at doing a live stream as well. So I hope it was an interesting experience for both of us. But if you are interested in looking at the report is available on startupgenome.com, and the link is here. And if you want to connect to Mustafa, his LinkedIn uh, uh, connection is there. And now, obviously, if you're looking at his live streaming, you can just connect to him automatically. But putting it there anyway, and hopefully we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much. Pleasure speaking to you, and I'll see you probably like tomorrow. Like you see each other very often, so
Exactly. Yeah. All right.
thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
See you.